Uh, let's mix it up a little bit tonight. Let's do prayer requests first. I like keeping y'all on your toes, man. All right, prayer requests first. Any requests that you would like to mention tonight that we could pray for? As I go down the list, I can tell you that Jamie Griffin's dad, Donnie, it's on your list in the middle of the top section. He is having surgery today, and I have not heard anything since he went into surgery. But he is having surgery today. Should be in surgery now unless he's done. All right, any prayer requests?
Our son-in-law had his knee replaced today.
Okay.
But he's doing fine.
Tell me his name.
Tommy Kimbrell usually sits right where he's
Oh, yeah, Tommy. No. I've still not worked out all the laws and in-laws of everybody. I'm working out y'all's names. Yeah.
He already knows me.
Well, I feel safe and saying everybody's kin to each other except Mel and me.
And me. And me, I'm out. I'm not a kin to any. Well, I guess I'm kin to one. The one who thinks she's fun. The one that thinks she's funny on Sunday mornings now. Thinks she's a comedian.
I apologize.
No, I don't want you to. I thought it was great.
I said, I'm sorry I embarrassed you.
Didn't embarrass me. You're going to do a lot more. Now, you get up there and, give me a whooping in front of everybody, I might get a little bit embarrassed. Just kind of as a way of a prayer request, but sort of a update. We're making some traction on our Pennsylvania missions with Christian Aguilar. He's on your list towards the bottom of the top section. He is the guy that pastors the migrant workers camp up in Pennsylvania. They are getting near towards having about 200 or 2,700 migrant workers that's under his care in essence through the church. And so one of the things that obviously there are different camps up there. You can imagine what a migrant worker camp might look like. Some of them are nicer than others and some of them have more than others. But generally they're showing up there with pretty much a small amount of whatever they might own. And so there's always great needs for towels, pillows, toiletries, all that sort of thing. A lot of times in the camp, they don't have just simple things like you and I have, like working microwaves or whatever the case may be. So when my team was up there, one of the things that we thought about was since they have so many, if we tried to respond to every single need as it arose, we would be constantly shipping or sending groups. So we decided, look, what if as an association, the West of the Flint River Baptist Association, well, what if we could just bring them a trailer full of everything they might need, and they can just go to the trailer and get it. That's one of the things that we're sort of working towards. And to that end, we have, Sandy's helping me with this. We're using his 40-foot container. It's going to be set up at Southside Baptist Church here before long, within the next week or so. That is a pretty central location for our association. And if there any, and here's the deal, like a lot of times you go, hey, Pastor, can our church use a really nice sofa, but we're getting a new one? There's nothing wrong with this one, but we're getting a new one. Whereas the church may not be able to use it, we're going to try to load stuff like that up in that trailer. And then on one day, on one occasion, late this summer, take the whole thing up there and be able to say to them at any point in time throughout this year, instead of you having to scramble to try to reach a need or you try to scramble to ask for a need, it's probably in this 40-foot container out here because we got a lot of stuff out here and you can just kind of go and get it. So, yes, I have that in my office and I can get it for you. Clothes, shoes, socks, toiletries, towels, those kind of things. Things like that can wear out and give out on you by the middle of the year. Just simply because, these guys are, this is where the guy that I met who was, while he was away, his daughter died. And he did not choose to go back home during his funeral time because he said, if I go back home, my wife and my other children don't eat. So he stayed to continue. So they're trying to send back as much as they can possibly send back. And a lot of these migrant workers, they're not what you would see where they work and then they go do stuff in the evenings. These guys work, go back to their camp, spend time at their camp, and get up and go work again. And I say camp, it's a lot of times like a military barracks type of situation there. So one of the things that we're obviously working on is trying to get a central location, which is going to be Southside. And so all of your pastors within the association are going to have a key to the trailer. And so we'll kind of start thinking towards a time when we can say, hey, this is a day we're going to go and load up stuff from our church. And so just be looking, the prayer request is be looking in things that you see, like if you got like a microwave that works and you don't need any more and it's just sitting in your garage and you might want to get rid of it, that's the kind of thing to take there. And obviously towels, anything they don't have to buy lets them send more money home to their wife and children. So that'd be something we're praying for there. We're also, the association is looking in some ways. There's some other churches in the area that we can also help with that need things like that can be done on a day trip or a day when we're up there fixing some things around some inner city churches, just doing a little bit of light construction, flooring kind of thing. And so we're just trying to figure out ways that we can help them as we go about it. So, and that's where you'll see every week the Christian Aguilar. That's the pastor that serves that area. If you are on Facebook and want to hear something really neat, follow him on Facebook. And the way that he does praise and worship music in Spanish is really neat, and it's really fun to watch. And he's really good at it. So great guy. I didn't either, but they are one of the Pennsylvania, or that area is one of the largest producers of apples anywhere in the country, and it is huge deal up there. And so I thought the same thing, because the camp we went to was right at Gettysburg.
Would we bring the stuff, have to take it there, or we bring it to the church?
Well, I think what we're going to try to do, obviously, is if we can, just meet it or take it to Southside and just put it straight in the trailer. And that's the central location for the whole association that we could identify and would let us put it there.
Can we get a list of the items either in the
Oh, yeah.
bulletin or?
Yeah, we'll put it out there for you here real soon. So, and it's really, there is a list of certain items, but keep in mind this is also a whatever you can send kind of thing. And that's one of the things that Christian said. He's like, you just never know what might arise that we might need, or we never know sometimes what we might need. But he was really gung-ho. He's like, if you want to send it, we'll take it. And one of the interesting things is they do a lot of their ministry around a campfire and eating. And so that's really, and if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. You're working all day, and the only time he really has time to go do ministry to them is dinner time around that campfire. So he said anything. They love chocolate. I don't know what, maybe Sandy, y'all can tell me why chocolate so much for them in particular is a great thing, but they're all about some chocolate. Anything you see or come across that is Spanish, in Spanish, witnessing type things and things that he can use is obviously a great thing. And some of the things, so really there will be a list, and there'll be things like towels, toiletries, toilet paper, anything like that. It will be for sure, but it's also, keep in mind, it's whatever else too. Different types of clothes, socks, underwears, shoes, warm stuff, cold stuff, warm weather gear stuff.
Is Southside going to set hours?
No, they are not going to set hours. We're not going to ask them to man it in particularly. But what we're going to do is going to give every pastor a key to be able to get into it. And we might say, unless we have some volunteers that'll man some hours, but we might say, okay, we're going to push for this Sunday afternoon. We're going to kind of have a delivery day for us, and then we'll run over and do it. They kind of work around their schedule. They do and what they have going on, but but we're all going to have a key. So,
Are there any children there?
nah, that's not usually something you have to worry about too much with them. Now, in the process of the trip, one of the things we're collecting is diapers and anything baby related. One of the churches there, the area that they serve and minister to, is it's a underprivileged community with a lot of young families coming out of Nepal, parts of South Africa, and that's just kind of where the factories and their work is. And so in their communities, they're mostly homeowners in a sense, but the homes are in rough shape. And for whatever reason, this particular church ministers to a lot of young families with babies. And so they were like, we asked them, how can we help? And they said some of the biggest things is just diapers to be able to give out when people need it. Because y'all know how expensive diapers are. And if your house is, got major problems, it's hard to also then spend that on diapers too. So we're doing that. One of the churches is in an inner city area. They're growing. They need some flooring put down in their children's ministry area or replaced or something. So we're going to bring some flooring, and hopefully some folks from the association will go. We can put that in. There's a lot we can do. There's almost nothing we can't put on that trailer because there are other churches that we're going to try to help. So we can pretty much take it.
Just remember the lifespan of some of that stuff, though. That would need to go in right before the trailer goes.
Yeah.
Stuff is chocolate and stuff like that.
Right. I don't know if we're going to put chocolate and things like that on there. And I don't know how much. I mean, I guess we probably could put some non-perishable canned goods and stuff on there. Chocolate might be something when we make the trip, we just grab and go, hey, I don't know why chocolate so much. And I guess if you ask not, you have not sort of deal. And one of the things that this pastor, Christian, is trying to figure out is some way to have utensil paper goods like you would eat off of that is designed with the gospel story and simplified pictures on it. And I don't know, I've yet to figure out how to do that, and I've been racking my brain since I tried to help them, because they do sit with these migrant workers and eat and tell the gospel story. And so a lot of them, reading and writing is sort of a tough deal, but picture things. And so he had this idea, and I've yet to figure out how to do it. Maybe some of y'all in here will go, oh, I can imagine that. You remember when you were in high school and you had the trays that you went through the lunch line and they had their own compartments? And he was like, man, if I could get something like that with the pictures of the gospel story in the trays, and as we eat, I can tell that gospel story. And I don't know how to figure that one out. I don't know. I talked to actually one guy he is in a creative type business, and supposedly he can do anything creative. And I was like, hey, can we get trays and put pictures of the gospel story on it? And the only thing he has yet to be able to figure out is the fact of eating off of it and the way those pictures would have to be printed on there. So it may be something that would have to come on the trays before the trays or as the trays are manufactured. And it may not be something that's even possible to do, but I mean, he's just trying to find. That's what I like about this guy, man. He's trying to do whatever, however, to reach those folks with the gospel. But I know last year he had just under 200 baptisms and professions of faith throughout his ministry, and that's pretty neat. It's pretty neat that this guy's from, he's a missionary to here from Honduras as well. We got missionaries that go to Honduras. He's coming from Honduras here to work with those people, and I'm really impressed by that. So trying to do anything we can do to help, but that process is moving along pretty well. Also continue to pray for Sealands Grove. That is a community also in Pennsylvania that on that trip, their pastor and I connected pretty well, and we've been communicating via email and via phone calls here recently, and just trying to see if there's something, maybe some way that our church can really partner with his church one-on-one and do some ministry opportunities there. So, and that's something that he has to get some things worked out on his end as far as permanent situations for him and all of that. So just continue to pray for Sealands Grove community which is the name right above above the Christian Aguilar name. All righty. Anything else?
Any report about, you want to share what's going on next door?
Oh, the fact that the garage is gone? Sure. I mean, the garage is gone. So, yeah, it's good to see some progress, and it looks great over there and be able to drive through there. So you'll still see, if you look tonight, you'll still see there's the disposals, the dumps are still over there. But, man, Sonny did a really pretty good job. I'm kind of going to see if I can sneak into his tractor tonight.
There'll be a lot of kids running around, don't drive fast.
I just put them in the bucket and swing them around.
There is something on Facebook where they move the children to one of that.
Oh, yeah. I've seen it done before. They put out the industrial tarp, wet it, put some slick on it, put like a ski rope on it, and they swing it around, and it's awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, youth ministers, we do some crazy stuff now. Anything to get a kid to show up at church. It's kind of how we roll. Any other prayer requests, though? Praise, little deal. 210 here Sunday. So that was a different sort of moment. Interesting that just having the school, and there's built-in 70 prospects that showed up with them on Sunday. So that's pretty neat. But even without those prospects, we still had a good Sunday. So it was a big time for us. So that's a good praise report. Anything else y'all want to pray about tonight before we jump into Bible study? Everybody's so quiet. Man, I bet you go over to Youth House right now and it's just, y'all are just, good. Mm-hmm. Nice. Ms. Gail. Miss Gail scares me sometimes.
She scared us too. We were real good class. We minded.
I bet. She was so sweet. One day we visited and she came to Stella's thing and she said, I need to see you. I puckered up real good. I was like, oh, what did I do now? Turns out I didn't do anything amazingly enough, but shocker. All right, well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, tonight we are so appreciative of the house you've given us to gather in, that we as a community of believers, and God, I just pray that you continue to grow us, make us stronger, help us to pull together for our community. God, we pray tonight for this list that's before us. God, you know all the things that are going on the other side of the country. You know all the things that are going on in the north. You know all the things that we're trying to do to reach across the world. And so, God, would you just be in the midst of all that? Would you guide our steps and put it all together so that things would work out to the honor and the glory of you? Also tonight, we just want to lift up Donnie Griffin to you, who's been in surgery today, and just pray that you would continue to help him to heal and to recover. We ask it in your name. Amen. So, all right.
In fact, she's here, and said that surgery went well, but he's having the issues with his kidneys.
Yeah.
So that the surgery didn't go well.
Well, good. See, we already got a praise report, an answered request. That's awesome.
Roger Hutt's 97-year-old mother had surgery this morning, and he's doing well.
Good. Man, y'all gonna have to start talking more during prayer request time. All right, we finished prayer requests and prayed, then y'all got prayer requests. Oh, like, hold up. Good. I'm glad that is working out for them, and appreciate all of y'all and the help that y'all are. So tonight, let's talk about some relationships. Let's talk about the subject of relationships. And your relationships can make you or they can break you. The people that you hang out with, the people that you call friend, people that you're married to, all the 9 yards can really make and break you in your life. And nobody knew that better than Paul, who wrote in the book of 2 Timothy, which is where we are tonight. 2 Timothy, the end of 2 Timothy, towards the end of much of Paul's writing. He's down near the probably in his life at the point where he's sort of thinking, I don't have a lot of time left. And he thinks back on his life and some of his relationships, especially the things most recent. And he writes a few things that I think is important for us to grasp and to understand in coming for all of this and coming through life, because I think it's true, and I think we've seen it. Your relationships that you have can make or break you. The people, you know this as when you were teenagers and you were young adults, the people that you hung around tended to influence your life. They tended to get you in a certain direction. A lot of times, even as a teenager, you would begin to dress the way the people around you dressed, the people that you hung out with. You would talk the way the people that you hang out with talk. You would think a lot of times the way you would think politically sometimes around the way that people you spend a lot of time with. And our heart tends to go out to people, and we tend to want to make that relationship everything it can be. And so we have to be careful about it, because those relationships can make you or they can break you. I love to do the illustration that I mentioned Sunday with teenagers. I love to put somebody up on a chair and say, pull me up to where you're at. Because we always think with our relationships, well, let me just relate to this person because I can pull them up to that level. I can pull them up to where I am. And then we find out, wait a minute, if I'm standing in a chair and tried to pull you up off the floor to my level, that's pretty difficult. But the same person could actually pull you down off that chair just like that. And so what we learn is in the human nature, we tend to, if we're not really, really careful, it's an awful lot easier to go down to the level of the people you're around rather than the level of the people that want to pull you, that you think you can pull up. And that's one of the reasons why the Bible talks about not being unequally yoked, because especially in a guy-girl situation, I'm telling you, it's so much easier to get pulled down in that situation than it is to pull up. And we have so many people that go, oh, but pastor, oh, but youth pastor, you just don't know. I can influence them. I can win them to Jesus. And then when they're looking real cute and want to kiss you, you're not thinking about Jesus anymore. And it's easier to get caught in that level right there. And so the people that we put in our life make a difference. And Paul had a lot of characters in his life. We know how we're going to begin studying in the book of Jonah this Sunday. In many ways, a lot of the folks in the beginning of Jonah were the precursors to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that is what Paul began his career as, began his life as, and he began to change his life. And Paul recognized towards the end of his life in chapter 4, things have made a difference based on the people that I've been around. So look at chapter 4, and we'll start in verse 9. Your Bible may label it as final instructions. And then you'll get down to the benediction. And a lot of times we don't read those. We don't read the greetings and the benedictions and the final instructions of Paul. We tend to the meat of it. But Paul says a lot in his final instructions and in his benediction. So he says, number 9, make every effort to come to me soon, for Demas has deserted me, because he loved this present world. And he has gone to Thessalonica. Cretans have gone to Galatia. Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you, for he's useful to me in the ministry. I've sent Tychicus to Ephesus. And when you come, bring the cloak I left in Troas with Carpus, as well as the scrolls, especially the parchments. Alexander, the coppersmith, did great harm to me. The Lord will repay him according to his works. Watch out for him, because he strongly opposed our words. At my first defense, meaning the first time he was in jail, no one came to my assistance, but everyone deserted me. May it not be counted against them. But the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, so that the proclamation might be fully made through me, and all the Gentiles might hear. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil work and will bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Greet Prisca and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. Erastus has remained at Corinth. Trophimus I left sick in Miletus. Make every effort to come before winter. Eubulus greets you, and as do Putin's Linus, Claudia, and the brothers. The Lord be with your spirit. Grace to you. Some characters right there in Paul. I don't know where they come up with Bible names at, but I'm sort of glad Mama picked Matthew. I don't want to be no Pudens or Linus or some of them other things, but I don't know where they come up with these characters at, but you just got introduced to a few of the characters that were central to Paul's life. The first one was a guy named Demas, and Demas deserted him. Demas is not high on his list anymore. When the going got tough and it's time for the tough to get going, Demas said, I'm out. He chose, as the Bible says, the world over everything else. And so what it means is that Demas really, really loved the world. And you say, am I not supposed to love the world? Yes. You are supposed to love the world. You're supposed to love the world like if God did a work, and we're supposed to be doing a work in the world. And when the world comes to know Christ, we're supposed to love that, the potential of what our world can become. But Demas says, he loved the world the way it was. No need to change it. Like, I want to enjoy it for what it offers. I want to enjoy it for the money, for the fame, for all the temporal stuff that you could get out of it. He said, look, why do I need to essentially, if we put it into our context for today, why do I need to sacrifice anything for others? And Jesus taught others first. But why do I need to sacrifice for others? I need to do my thing. And I need to get my wealth, and I need everybody to pay attention to me, and I want my happiness and my worldly pleasure, not really worried about everybody else. And so Demas was at once a time somebody that Paul could count on, and he says, he's just deserted me. He just said, I'm out. He's the church member who was faithful for a long, long time and then said, I don't know, I want what I can get now. I want to chase the world's money. I want to chase the things of the world instead of chasing the things of God. And you can tell from Paul's writing that this guy deserting him did a number on him. You could tell that for Paul, it was like, man, this one hurts. And you can tell in a lot of ways, this one made him really kind of sad and upset and put him in a place where he's like, man, this is just not right. And it really hurt Paul. And a lot of times, man, we like to think, well, you know, if you're not with me, you're against me. If you're not for me, you're against me. And oh, well. And we like to say, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. And we like to just shake it all off. But you could kind of tell for Paul, man, this was tough. And I think it's tough for us, man, when we lose friends, when we have people around us and we lose those relationships, or people talk bad about us, or people stab us in the back, or we feel like they desert us. And it's a difficult thing. And I think Paul understood that in a lot of ways, this was making him and it was breaking him. But the good news is, thinking of Demas, he started thinking about the other folks that were around him. And they weren't all good, but they definitely weren't all bad. Look at the next one. He comes up and he says about his partner, only Luke is with me. And so this is Luke that wrote and authored the book of Luke and the book of Acts. We know some things about Luke. We know that Luke was a scholar and a historian. We know that from his writing, we can tell. And I think one of the things about Luke being with Paul and being in the middle of everything, like Paul wasn't one of those Christians that just sort of stayed on the outskirts of things. He didn't just sort of look into Christianity every now and then. If something was going down, Paul was in the middle of it. Paul was one of those guys who said, I ain't playing this safe. If, Lord, you tell me there's some demons to slay, where's my sword? I'm going to slay some demons. And we know from Paul, man, the guy was shipwrecked. He was arrested. He had all kinds of things happen to him. And he says, only my guy is with me, Luke. And I think one of the things that was important for Luke was to tell the history of all of the stuff that he saw and he did. And you can tell that from his writings. But we also know that Luke was at one time a Gentile, or began as a Gentile. Colossians 4, verses 10 and 4 through 14, talk about where he came from, that he was a Gentile. And so not exactly where you would think those two are going to connect, but they connected and they were tough. The third thing that we know about Luke was that Luke was a physician. And I think that's one of the big reasons why him and Paul got along so well. When you're shipwrecked, who you think you might need? Doctor. When you're beat up and when you've been attacked, who you going and left in a ditch, who you going to need? A doctor. When you've been in prison for a while, who you going to need? A doctor. And I think the Lord really put them two together because he knew, look, Paul is about to go through some stuff. But I'm going to put a person in his life that I don't want to sound so sappy as to say he completes him, but he is an extension of him. He is somebody that what Paul doesn't have, Luke has. And Luke is willing to do and use what's his disposal for the best of Paul, and Paul is willing to do what is his disposal for the best of Luke. And I think they made a great partnership. They were equals. They were both sort of at the risk of sounding like a Hallmark movie that you watch on a date night, which that was not what it is at all. But they made each other better. They were compatible. They were a best friend. It was somebody that Luke can say, Paul, dude, how many times am I going to have to stitch you up? Luke, Paul, how many times are you going to get yourself in this mess? But he understood that Paul had a call on his life. And of course, so did Luke. And so they were there to support one another. And that might have been the biggest thing. And look, because I get it. You don't always need yes men around you. Sometimes you need people around you that'll challenge you. But man, you need friends that you can call on when stuff falls apart, when stuff goes haywire. You need people that you can count on, and you need people that are good at things that you're not good at. And I'm thankful that I am developing those now. Y'all don't know this, but Danny Jenkins came and bailed me out like at 10 o'clock Sunday night, wasn't it? It was pretty late, probably past your bedtime. Carrie's car decided, her alternator said, no, I'm not going to work anymore. And so there I jumped in the car down to the dollar store to go and fix her car and jump it off. Well, in the process of that, Matt's car said, nope, not going to work anymore either. And there was two cars, and I'm like, dude, I don't know. And I'm trying to fix this, and I can't figure it out. And here comes Danny down the road. I got you, bro. And I'm like, Danny, I don't know what's going on, but Danny got us home and got us ready to go and everything. And now I got another friend coming this weekend to bring 2 alternators and 2 batteries and go fix it right there because I ain't got a car to go anywhere with. And all this while, Michael's letting me borrow his truck again. And so I'm like, man, you just never understand. That's stuff that you need. And you need people like that in your life that you can count on. So that's my way of saying thank you. In many ways, Danny, thank you very much. And thank you for the help that you are. It's a partner. And some of your friends are partners. And some of your friends are your partners as long as stuff goes their way. As long as it benefits them, they're your partners. And you have to watch out for those. That was not Luke. Luke was the guy that was going to be with you no matter what. Then he talks about another guy. Then he mentions Mark. You can imagine who Mark is, wrote the Gospel of Mark, but in many ways, Mark is Paul's protege. He was somebody that Paul was teaching. He says, bring him with you. He's helpful to me in my ministry. He was somebody that could help him. He was somebody that was probably in Paul's life in the sense of, I'm going to be able to learn from this guy. And you ought to, everybody in here, man or woman, we really ought to have somebody in our life that we're passing down knowledge to, that we're helping raise up. And I would add this. I wrote this down in my notes. Not just people in your family. Because oftentimes it's pretty easy to pick somebody in our family and go, I'm going to pass down some stuff to my family. But there's a lot of people in the world that don't have families. They don't have good families, or they don't have anybody in their family willing to pass down anything to. And sometimes one of the reasons why God has put church together is to connect some older men with some younger men that we're passing down knowledge to connect some older women with some younger women that we're passing down to. And it may not be somebody in your family. It may be somebody that totally doesn't have the family and needs it. I find it interesting that he says, when you come, bring the cloak. You know where Paul's at? Prison. Getting a little damp. It's getting a little cold. That was probably some sort of overcoat that would go over what he was to keep him warm and dry. And then he says, bring my scrolls, especially the parchments. It's very likely that Paul's in prison, and guess what? He didn't have time to run home and get his stuff. And he's like, I have entrusted my protege with this stuff. He is a person that when I am gone, when I'm not here, he handles what I'm supposed to handle. But you know what is interesting to me? It's very likely that that's part of the Old Testament scriptures right there. It's probably part of the Gospels right there. And it's probably some of his manuscripts of some of the things that Paul is writing. And if he didn't have a younger guy, if he didn't have a protege, would we have the Bible that we have today? Would we be able to find these works and these things? And that is one of the reasons why I love studying the Bible and went to seminary, because we read that and we never think, well, wait a minute, that could have been the Gospels. He could have had some copies of the Gospels that some of these guys were writing, or at least the work. Could have been some of his manuscripts that are not quite out there yet at that time, because he's obviously writing some of them. That could have been the Bible that we have in our hand today. And had Paul said, you know, I don't need anybody else. I got this. Because isn't that what we tend to do when we really know something well? We have this tendency, I'm going to just do it myself. I'm not patient enough to teach, don't want to help somebody out. But it takes work and effort to invest in the next generation, to take work and effort and to invest it into other people. And so I think it's really important that he had somebody like that in his life that was helpful to him, that was in the same line of work that he was in, that he can invest in and move towards. But he also has other guys. Look at him. He mentions another bad guy in the whole midst of all of this, the adversary, he calls him, Alexander, the metal worker. He did me a great harm. And notice what he says. This is really important. The Lord will repay him. Not Paul's going to repay him. Not Paul's going to get him later when he sees him in the backyard of the playground at school. The Lord will repay him. And I need you to understand this. Just like you always need a protege, you just need to know you always need somebody who's going to be against you. You need somebody who's going to be against you. You need that. That challenges you in your life. That pushes you in your life. And we need people that are always going to be against the church in our life. Because guess what? Satan is not omnipresent and he is not omnipowerful. And if there's a church out there doing nothing, Satan don't need to deal with them. But he has to physically say, that church in Zebulun's doing something, I need to attack them. And I want to always be doing something. And sometimes I'm going to know I'm doing the right thing by the fact that I got somebody against me. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes you got people against you because you're an idiot and you do dumb stuff. And you have to be able to work through that. And that's part of having these other friends around you. And it's very likely that Alexander was a guy who was a witness against Paul in some of these trials. But you know what? Having that guy against you is usually the guy that tells you, I'm doing it right. If you wonder, am I doing it right? Am I trying hard enough? Am I going all out? If you got somebody against you, you probably are. And sometimes you need that in your life. And Alexander was that for Paul. And Paul did not, sit there and talk badly about him. He just said the Lord will repay him. And that's what I think that I want to leave you with tonight, is how Paul responded to all these characters. He responded, and the way he responded, especially to the opposition he had in his life, to the people that were against him. The biggest way that I see that Paul responded was with grace. Look at how verse 16 says it. At my first defense, nobody came to my support, but everybody deserted me. Paul was probably virtually alone, and he was probably lonely. And he was probably in a bad place. Energy level would have been low. It would have been easy to go pity party, and everybody's against me. And Paul says what? May it not be held against them. Now, I know my tendencies are like, man, why are they out to get me? I'm going to get them. Don't mess with me. That's our tendency. And Paul says, I'm going to just show them grace. Don't let it be held against them, Lord. You know who else said that? Jesus said that on the cross. He said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what we do. And it's in those tough times in life and those opposition times in life where we get really tried and really tested, and the real us really shows up. And the more like Jesus we are, is the more we show grace in the midst of those things. And so Paul responded with God's grace, and Paul responded also and relied upon God's defense. Notice that, verse 17. He said, but the Lord stood at my side, and he gave me strength. And here's why that's so important. He's writing this to Timothy. Timothy's a young man. Timothy's probably fearful because his mentor, Paul, is in prison. The church is in turmoil. There are things that are happening, and it's difficult, and it is not easy. And Paul is probably writing to Timothy in the midst of all this, and his first thought is, how do I help this guy? And to be able to do that, he had to rely on the fact that God was going to defend Paul. And Paul said, I'm going to leave that in God's hands here, and I'm going to focus on helping Timothy. And that's the third thing, because Paul remembered God's purpose in it. Look at verse 17. So that through me, the message might be fully proclaimed. He said, I want the message fully proclaimed to everyone. Do it through me. Do it through me. Some people have the personality of going, God, I'm not one of your strongest warriors. Leave me out of this. Paul's the type who's like, I want to be in the middle of all of it. Put me in, coach. I am ready to play. And you know what? That's true a lot of times. In a lot of ways, what church ought to be on Sundays, along with that filling station, it's a huddle, and it's a practice. And Friday nights are not going to be any fun for anybody if you practice all week, and then when the lights come on Friday night, you don't go play. And for us, in many ways, Paul understood that God was teaching him, and God was practicing him because he wanted to be in the game on Friday. He wanted the ball in his hands. When the shot clock was running down, he wanted the ball in his hands. He wanted to take the shot. He was willing to be in the midst of all that, no matter what it cost him. He said he wants all of it. And he says in verse 18, the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack, and he will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Not to Paul, not just to the church, but the glory to God for all of it. And he says, from every evil attack. That means, look, I am fully aware that some of the mistakes we make get us in places that we don't want to be in. But I'm also at the same time fully aware, and we don't like to talk about this a bunch in church, there's also a war against the powers and the principalities, and there's things happening that you can't see, that you didn't bring on yourself, that you just decided to follow God, and the devil attacked you. And you need to understand that. There are times when the devil is attacking you, and it is a spiritual battle. And then there are some times that we make bad choices and we get ourselves in bad situations. And that's where we need the Lord in the middle of all that to recognize. And so every time somebody's against me or every time somebody's against us, we don't just go and say, well, that's the devil is attacking. Sometimes we have to go and say, is there some truth in what these people are saying? And we have to sort of double check our motives. And we need somebody like Luke and somebody like Mark around us to go, no, you were right. You're doing right. This is the devil. And we need to know that difference in there sometimes. And then he says, kind of continues with that. He says, greet Priscilla and Aquila and the household. Do your best to get here before winter. The Lord be with you. Grace to all of you. And you know what I think he's kind of getting at in that? I think that's his way of saying, just slow down. Just do your best to get here before winter. You ain't got to get here tomorrow. And look, I realize they didn't have cars back then. It took a while to get someplace. But I think it was kind of his way of saying, slow down. Don't rush through life. Enjoy the little things. And look for ways to make an impact. Because here's you say, where you get that? If you're in prison and you're cold and you're wet and you're lonely, are you going to take time to say, hey, while you're at it, while you're thinking about me and while you're getting ready to help me, hey, greet Priscilla for me and greet Aquila for me. If it's all about you in that moment, you're just like, hurry up and get here. I'm cold, I'm wet, I'm lonely. And Paul takes the time to say, by the way, go and greet Priscilla and Aquila and talk about, go meet these people. Do your best to get here for winter, but look, the Lord be with you. Grace to all of you. If it's all about you, and if it's all about what you can get in life, and it's all about hurrying up in life, you're not going to take time to say that. But Paul takes the time to go through all of that. Because I think even in this moment, prison or no prison, end of his life or the beginning of his life, he understands at this moment, you got to find a way to make an impact as you go. And that's part of making disciples. As you are going, you look for ways that you can make an impact in life. And most of those impacts you can make with the people sitting next to you right now and the people you spend your time with throughout the week. That is your easiest opportunity to make an impact on others. Father, tonight I'm so grateful that you are interested in every part of our life, and you are so interested in every step that we take. And so, God, even the little things in life, you're trying to teach us something. And I thank you for the influence and the example that Paul gives us. And Lord, I know Paul made some mistakes, and he got shipwrecked, and he got snake bit, and he got beat up, and he got in prison, and all those things, God. But give us the gung-ho-ness that Paul had. Give us the gumption and the moxie in our life to say, God, if you want me to slay giants, just point them out. And so, Lord, we pray tonight again for these requests. We thank you that even in minutes and even in moments, you've answered them already. We ask it in your name. Amen. All right, so I preached 10 minutes long on Sunday. It's 10 minutes before 7. So now we're